The handcuffs clicked tight around 19-year-old Marina's wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. The entire first-class cabin of Flight 409 fell silent, watching as the smug flight attendant Patricia practically shoved the young girl toward Thuuksua, the exit. Patricia thought she had just caught a stowaway, a thug who stole a ticket. She had no idea she was manhandling the sole heiress to the Sterling Airways empire. She didn't know that the black SUV speeding across the tarmac outside didn't belong to the police. It belonged to the man who signed her paychecks. And when he stepped onto that plane, the silence would turn into scream. The early morning fog at JFK International Airport was just beginning to lift, revealing the massive steel wings of the Boeing 777 sitting at Gate B12. This was the pride of the fleet for Sterling Airways, a flagship jet heading straight for London Heathrow. Inside the first-class cabin, everything was pristine. The scent of expensive leather and fresh orchids filled the air. It was a world of hushed tones, champagne flutes and cashmere blankets. It was a world that Patricia Vance, the senior purser for Sterling Airways, ruled with an iron fist. Patricia was 45, with blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection and a uniform that was tailored a little too tightly. She viewed the first-class cabin not as her workplace, but as her personal kingdom. She prided herself on keeping the riffraff out. She had a sixth sense for people who didn't belong, or so she thought. That morning, Patricia was already in a foul mood. The catering truck was late with the filet mignon, and her coffee was lukewarm. She was adjusting the napkins on the drink cart when she saw her. A young black girl walked onto the plane. She couldn't have been more than 19. She was wearing an oversized faded charcoal hoodie with paint splatters on the cuffs, ripped baggy jeans and scuffed combat boots. Her hair was pulled back in messy braids, and she had large noise-cancelling headphones resting around her neck. She carried a battered canvas messenger bag that looked like it had survived a war zone. Patricia's eyes narrowed into slits. She stopped wiping the counter and stepped directly into the aisle, blocking the path to the first-class seats. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that barely masked the venom underneath. "Economy is to the right, dear. Keep walking past the galley row. 40 is in the back." The girl, Marina, paused. She looked up from her phone, her expression calm, almost bored. She didn't seem intimidated by the uniform or the glare. "I know where economy is," Marina said, her voice soft but clear. "But I'm not sitting in economy." Marina sidestepped Patricia and moved toward seat 1A, the most exclusive, expensive suite on the entire plane. It was a pod that cost more than most people's cars. Patricia gasped audibly. She turned on her heel and marched after Marina, who was already tossing her battered bag into the overhead bin reserved for first-class passengers. "Stop right there," Patricia snapped, her voice rising an octave. "You cannot put your items in there. That bin is for first-class passengers only. I need you to take your bag and move to your assigned seat immediately before I have security escort you off." Marina sighed a long, tired sound. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a boarding pass. She held it out without looking at Patricia, her attention already drifting to the window. "Seat 1A, Marina said. "Marina Sterling." Patricia snatched the ticket from her hand. She stared at it. It looked real. It had the gold foil strip across the top, the Priority 1 stamp, and the seat assignment 1A. But Patricia's mind couldn't process it. In her world, girls who looked like Marina Young Black, dressed in street clothes, did not sit in seat 1A. They sat in the back near the toilets. Therefore, the ticket had to be fake, or stolen. "Where did you get this?" Patricia demanded, waving the ticket in Marina's face. "I printed it at the kiosk," Marina replied, finally sitting down in the plush leather seat and kicking off her boots. She pulled a sketchbook out of her bag. "Can I get a water, please, no ice?" The audacity. The sheer entitlement. Patricia felt the blood rushing to her face. She looked around the cabin. A wealthy businessman in 1C was watching over the top of his newspaper, frowning. An elderly woman in 2A, clutching a pearl necklace, looked terrified. Patricia felt the pressure. She had to protect the integrity of the cabin. "I don't know who you think you're fooling," Patricia hissed, leaning down so her face was inches from Marina's. "But this ticket is clearly fraudulent. Systems glitch, or maybe you swiped it from someone in the lounge. We both know you can't afford a $12,000 seat." Marina opened her sketchbook, picked up a charcoal pencil and started shading. "Check the manifest, Patricia. I'm on the list." Patricia recoiled. She hadn't been wearing her name tag. "How do you know my name?" Patricia whispered, suddenly unsettled. "It's on the flight crew roster," Marina said, not looking up. "Patricia Vance, Senior Purser, 15 years of service. 3 customer complaints in the last 6 months for unprofessional conduct. Make that 4 after today." Patricia's face went from red to a pale, ghostly white, then back to a furious crimson. She snatched the ticket again. "Stay here," she ordered. "Don't touch the champagne. Don't touch the amenities. I'm going to run this through the system, and when it comes back, rejected, you are going to jail." Patricia stormed off toward the galley, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor. Marina just put her headphones on, drowning out the murmurs of the judgmental passengers around her. She knew exactly what was about to happen. She had warned her dad this would happen if she flew commercial, but he insisted she experience the product like a normal customer. Well, she was certainly experiencing something. Patricia burst into the galley, startling the junior flight attendant, a kind-faced young woman named Sarah. "Sarah, get the gate agent on the line, now," Patricia barked, slamming the curtain shut. "What's wrong, Patricia?" "Is there a medical emergency?" Sarah asked, reaching for the interphone. "Security emergency," Patricia corrected, her hands shaking as she typed furiously into the flight manifest computer. "We have a squatter in 1A, a hoodlum. She's got a ticket, but it's obviously a forgery. I'm not having the flight to London ruined by some graffiti artist junkie." Sarah frowned, looking through the gap in the curtain at Marina, who was quietly drawing in her book. She looks pretty harmless, Patricia. Are you sure the manifest says M. Sterling?" "Sterling," Patricia scoffed. Probably a common name she picked to sound important, or she stole the identity. "Look at her clothes, Sarah. Look at those boots. Does that look like a Sterling to you?" Patricia hit the refresh button on the digital manifest. The screen loaded. Seat 1A occupied. "Passenger, Sterling Marina. Status VIP, do not disturb." The screen flashed a distinct code, AUth 99. Patricia stared at the code. She had never seen AUth 99 before. Usually VIPs were marked as gold or platinum. This code was strange. "See," Patricia said, her confirmation bias twisting the facts. AUth 99. That's probably an error code. Authorization 99% failed. It's a hacked ticket. She hacked the app. "I think we should ask the captain," Sarah suggested nervously. "If the ticket scanned at the gate." "The gate agents are lazy idiots," Patricia snapped. "They probably just waved her through because they didn't want a confrontation. You know how these people get when you challenge them." Sarah flinched at the racist undertone, but she was too junior to challenge Patricia, who had the power to get her fired. Patricia grabbed the interphone and called the cockpit. "Captain Reynolds speaking. A deep, authoritative voice answered. "Captain, this is Patricia in the forward galley. We have a situation. There is a passenger in 1A who refuses to move. She has a suspicious ticket with an error code, and she fits the profile of a security risk. She's hostile and belligerent." Marina, of course, had been perfectly calm, but Patricia knew how to play the game. You had to use the keywords hostile, belligerent, risk. "A security risk?" Captain Reynolds asked. "Has she made threats?" "She knew my name, Captain." Patricia lied, twisting the truth. "She threatened my job. She implies she has access to our internal systems. I believe she may have bypassed TSA screening." There was a pause on the line. "If she bypassed TSA, we can't take off. I'm not risking a bird in the air with an unverified passenger. Do you want me to call Port Authority?" Patricia smiled, a cruel, satisfied smile. "Yes, Captain. Tell them we have a trespasser refusing to deplane. And tell them to hurry. I want her off my ship." Patricia hung up the phone and smoothed her skirt. She walked back out into the cabin. She didn't go to Marina quietly. She wanted an audience. She wanted to humiliate this girl so thoroughly that she would never dare step foot in an airport again. She stood in the middle of the aisle and clapped her hands for attention. The first-class passengers looked up. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay," Patricia announced loudly. "We have a security issue involving a passenger who has boarded illegally. We are waiting for law enforcement to remove the individual so we can ensure your safety." She turned her gaze directly to Marina. Marina didn't flinch. She took off her headphones and looked Patricia in the eye. "You really shouldn't have done that, Patricia," Marina said quietly. "Save it for the police, honey," Patricia sneered, "and get your dirty feet off the leather." Suddenly, a man in seat 2B, a heavy-set guy in a tailored suit, spoke up. "Hey, just get her off the plane. I have a meeting in London at 6 p.m. "Yeah, throw her out," another passenger yelled. The mob mentality was setting in. They saw a young black girl in a hoodie and a white flight attendant in a uniform, and they made their choice. They assumed guilt. Marina closed her sketchbook slowly. She reached into her bag. "Don't move," Patricia shrieked, jumping back. "She's reaching for a weapon." Marina pulled out a phone, a sleek black satellite phone, a prototype that wasn't even on the market yet. She dialed a single number. "Security!" Patricia screamed, pointing at the door. Two Port Authority officers, burly men with hands on their belts, marched onto the plane. They looked at Patricia, then at the small girl sitting in the big chair. "Is this the disturbance, ma'am?" Officer Miller asked, looking confused. "Yes," Patricia cried, playing the victim perfectly. "She's refused to show ID, she's threatened the crew, and her ticket is fraudulent. I want her arrested for trespassing and theft of services." Officer Miller stepped toward Marina. He pulled out his handcuffs. "Miss, I'm going to need you to stand up and put your hands behind your back," Miller said sternly. Marina held the phone to her ear. She held up one finger to the officer. "1 second, she said. "Now," Miller shouted, grabbing her arm. "Dad," Marina said into the phone, her voice calm but icy. "Yeah, it's happening. Just like I said it would. JFK Flight 409. Yeah, Patricia Vance. She just called the cops on me. No, don't call the lawyer." Marina looked at Patricia, a small, dark smile playing on her lips. "Come here yourself." Officer Miller didn't like being made to wait, especially not by a teenager in a hoodie who thought she could make phone calls while being detained. He snatched the satellite phone from Marina's hand and ended the call. "That's enough," Miller grunted, shoving the phone into his own pocket. "Stand up, hands behind your back." Marina stood up slowly. She didn't resist, but her eyes never left Patricia. That stare, it was unnerving. It wasn't the look of a guilty person. It was the look of a judge watching an executioner fumble the axe. "You're making a mistake, officer," Marina said calmly as the cold steel cuffs clicked around her wrists. "A very expensive mistake." "I'll take my chances," Miller said, tightening the cuffs until they pinched her skin. Patricia watched with glee, but a nugget of anxiety was growing in her stomach. That phone call. "Dad, come here yourself." Who was she talking to? And the way she spoke it was too educated, too confident. Patricia had been a flight attendant for 20 years. She knew that stowaways usually cried, begged, or ran. They didn't sit in silence. Patricia needed to make sure this stuck. If the police got her to the station and found out it was just a misunderstanding about a ticket glitch, Patricia might get a reprimand for delaying the flight. She needed a crime. A real crime. Her eyes darted to Mr. Henderson, the businessman in seat 1C, who had yelled earlier. He had his suit jacket draped over the empty seat next to him. Patricia moved quickly. Feigning concern, she stepped toward Mr. Henderson. "Sir, I am so sorry for this disruption," she said loudly, making sure the officers could hear. "While we were dealing with this individual, did you notice her reaching toward your area? She was quite close to your jacket." Mr. Henderson blinked, confused. "What?" "No. I was reading the paper. Please just check your pockets," Patricia urged, her eyes widening significantly, signaling him to play along. "We've had reports of pickpockets working in teams at the airport today, and she was standing right over you when she boarded. The power of suggestion is a dangerous thing." Mr. Henderson, already agitated and prejudiced against Marina's appearance, patted his jacket pocket. He frowned. He checked the inside pocket. "My wallet," he muttered. He patted his pants. I can't find my wallet." A gasp went through the first-class cabin. "She took it!" Patricia shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger at Marina. "I saw her bump into you when she forced her way past me. Officer, arrest her for theft. That wallet probably has thousands of dollars in it." Officer Miller's demeanor changed instantly. Trespassing was one thing. Theft on an aircraft was a federal offense. He spun Marina around, roughly slamming her shoulder against the bulkhead. "Where is it?" Miller barked. "Where's the wallet?" "I didn't take anything," Marina said, wincing from the impact. "Check the cameras, or check her pockets." She nodded toward Patricia. "Don't you dare accuse me," Patricia shouted, playing the outraged victim perfectly. "I have worked for Sterling Airways for 15 years. I am a professional. You are a common street thief." "Check her bag," Mr. Henderson yelled, standing up, now his face red. "I had $3,000 cash in there, and my corporate credit cards." "Search her." Officer Miller grabbed Marina's battered canvas bag from the overhead bin. He dumped the contents onto the pristine leather seat of 1A. Sketchbooks, charcoal pencils, a bottle of water, an old iPod, and a sweater tumbled out. No wallet. "It's not here," Miller said, frowning. Patricia's heart hammered. She hadn't actually planted the wallet, she just needed the accusation to get Marina off the plane. She needed to improvise. She probably handed it off to an accomplice in economy before she sat down. Patricia improvised wildly. Or she flushed it down the toilet to hide the evidence. "Officer, get her off this plane so we can search the cabin properly. She is a criminal mastermind." "That's it," Miller said. He grabbed Marina by the bicep, his grip bruising. "You're coming with us. We'll strip search you at the precinct." As they began to drag Marina down the aisle, Patricia leaned in close to Marina's ear. "You thought you could come into my world and act like you belong. Patricia whispered, her voice venomous. "Enjoy prison, sweetheart. I hope the cell is comfortable." Marina stopped walking. She forced the officer to halt for a split second. She looked Patricia dead in the eye. "Your world," Marina repeated softly. "Patricia, look out the window. Move!" Miller shoved Marina forward, breaking the moment. But Patricia couldn't help herself. She glanced out the porthole window of the galley door as they dragged Marina onto the jet bridge. Her heart stopped. Racing across the tarmac, ignoring all speed limits and safety lanes, were 3 matte black SUVs. They weren't police vehicles. They weren't airport security. They had the silver falcon emblem of Sterling Enterprises painted on the doors, and they were heading straight for the stairs of the jet bridge. The walk up the jet bridge was humiliating. Officer Miller and his partner, Officer Davis, weren't being gentle. They paraded Marina past the long line of economy passengers waiting to board. "Is that a thief?" a woman whispered loudly, pulling her child closer. "Probably drugs," a man muttered. "Look at how she's dressed. Good thing they caught her before takeoff." Marina kept her head high, but her wrists were burning. The injustice of it was suffocating. She had grown up in boarding schools, sheltered by her father's immense wealth. But she had always known this reality existed. Her father, Arthur, had warned her. "The money protects you, Marina, but only if people know you have it. Without the name, the world can be a cold place." She hadn't believed him. She wanted to be an artist. She wanted to be just Marina. She wanted to prove she could navigate the world without the sterling name opening every door. She was wrong. They burst out of the jet bridge and into the terminal gate area. It was crowded. Hundreds of people were waiting for Flight 409. When they saw the handcuffs, the whispers turned into a roar. People pulled out their phones, recording the criminal being hauled away. "Make way, police business!" Miller shouted, pushing through the crowd. Patricia followed close behind, carrying Marina's dumped-out bag. She wanted to see this through to the end. She wanted to give her statement to the police sergeant at the gate podium and ensure this girl was banned for life. "I need your badge number," Patricia said to Miller as they reached the podium. "I'm going to file a full corporate report. Sterling Airways will be pressing charges for theft, disruption of a federal flight and emotional distress to the crew." "We'll get your statement in a minute, ma'am," Miller said, pushing Marina down into a hard plastic chair near the gate desk. "Sit. Don't move." Suddenly, the walkie-talkie on Miller's shoulder crackled to life. It wasn't the usual static. It was the frantic voice of the airport police chief. All units. Clear the tarmac immediately. We have a code black breach at gate B12. Repeat code black." Miller frowned, pressing the button. "Dispatch, this is Miller at B12. We have the suspect in custody. What's a code black?" "It's not a threat, Miller. It's a VIP arrival, unscheduled. Ground control is screaming. Someone just drove through the security checkpoint without stopping, and they have clearance from the FAA." Miller looked confused. Who has that kind of clearance? Before the dispatcher could answer, the glass doors leading from the tarmac stairs doors that were strictly for authorized personnel only burst open. The sound that followed was silence. Absolute, stunned silence. 2 massive bodyguards in earpieces and tactical suits stepped through the doors first. They didn't look like mall cops. They looked like special forces. They scanned the room instantly, their eyes locking on Officer Miller and the handcuffed girl. Then a man walked in. He was 6'4", a towering figure of authority. He wore a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than the average American home. His skin was a deep, rich mahogany, and his beard was trimmed to geometric perfection. He radiated power. It was a power that made the air in the room feel heavy. It was Arthur Sterling. the CEO of Sterling Airways, the man who owned the planes, the terminals, and arguably half the politicians in the city. His face was on the cover of Forbes magazine in the newsstand right next to Gate B12. Patricia froze. She dropped Marina's canvas bag on the floor. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had seen him at company town halls on video screens from a distance. But seeing him in person with that look of thunderous rage on his face was terrifying. Arthur Sterling didn't look at the police. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight toward the plastic chair where Marina was sitting. Officer Miller, not recognizing him, immediately stepped in front of him. "Sir, this is a police scene. You need to back away." One of the bodyguards moved so fast it was a blur, stepping between Miller and Arthur. "Touch him, and you lose your hand," the bodyguard said. His voice was low, flat, and deadly serious. Arthur ignored Miller completely. He looked down at Marina. He saw the ripped jeans. He saw the paint on her hoodie. And then he saw the handcuffs. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Arthur slowly turned his head to look at Officer Miller, and then at Patricia. "Who?" Arthur's voice was a low rumble, like an approaching earthquake. "Who put these chains on my daughter?" The word hung in the air. Daughter. Patricia felt her knees buckle. She grabbed the edge of the podium to stay upright. Daughter," Miller stammered, looking from the billionaire to the girl in the hoodie. "Sir, the suspect." "Suspect!" Arthur roared. The volume was so sudden, so violent, that people in the back of the terminal jumped. "You have the sole heiress to the Sterling Empire, shackled like an animal in her own terminal." Arthur turned to his bodyguard. "Key, now." The bodyguard produced a universal handcuff key. Miller didn't dare stop him. The bodyguard unlocked Marina's cuffs. Marina rubbed her wrists, revealing red, angry welts where the metal had dug in. Arthur took her hands, gently inspecting the marks. His eyes filled with pain for a second, before hardening into cold, diamond-hard fury. He turned to face Patricia. Patricia was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. She tried to speak, tried to default to her training. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I didn't know. She didn't look..." "She didn't look like what, Patricia?" Arthur asked softly. He took a step toward her. The crowd parted. "She didn't look like she belonged in first class. Is that it? She had a ticket with an error code." Patricia squeaked, desperate to find a lifeline. It said, AUTH 99. I thought it was fake. Arthur laughed. It was a terrifying, humorless sound. "AUTH 99 isn't an error, you incompetent fool," Arthur spat. "It stands for Authorization Level 99. Owner, Founder, CEO. It means that seat belongs to her more than the plane belongs to the bank." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't dial 911. He dialed the chief of police directly on a private line. "Chief O'Malley. It's Arthur Sterling. I'm at gate B12. I have 2 of your officers here who just assaulted my daughter. Yes, I'll wait. And send the airport legal counsel. I'm going to fire everyone in this room." He hung up and looked at Patricia. "But you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. "I'm not just going to fire you, Patricia. I'm going to destroy you." The atmosphere at gate B12 had shifted from a chaotic airport terminal to a high-stakes courtroom. The arrival of Arthur Sterling had effectively frozen time. No one was boarding Flight 409. The pilots had come out of the cockpit and were standing nervously by the jet bridge door. The crowd of onlookers, initially eager to film a criminal, were now filming a corporate execution. Within 10 minutes, the suits arrived. They were Sterling Enterprises' legal team, led by Matthew Blackwood, a man known in the legal world as the Shark. He didn't carry a briefcase. He carried an iPad and a look of absolute boredom with the incompetence surrounding him. He walked straight up to Arthur, ignoring the police completely. "Mr. Sterling," Blackwood said, his voice smooth. "We have the airport authority on line 1, and the PR team is scrubbing the initial social media posts. I've already drafted the lawsuits." "Good," Arthur said, his eyes never leaving Patricia. "But first we deal with the crime." Arthur turned to Officer Miller, who was now sweating profusely. The officer had realized too late that he had manhandled the daughter of the man who effectively paid the city's police pension fund contributions via taxes and donations. "Officer Toole," Arthur said, his voice dangerously calm, "you arrested my daughter for theft. Based on what evidence?" "Well, sir," Miller stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Mr. Henderson, the businessman from seat 1C. "The witness, the victim. He stated his wallet was missing, and the flight attendant, Ms. Vance. She identified the suspect as the only person near him." Arthur turned his gaze to Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a large man, accustomed to bullying waitresses and junior employees, but shrinking under the gaze of a true titan of industry. He clutched his suit jacket, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Mr. Henderson, is it?" Arthur asked, stepping closer. "You work for, let me guess, reviewing the tag on your bag. Orion Logistics." Henderson nodded, pale. Yes, sir." "I know the owner of Orion," Arthur said, casually. "We just signed a cargo contract with them. It would be a shame if I had to call him and tell him his VP of sales makes false police reports to racially profile teenagers." "I didn't," Henderson squeaked. "My wallet is gone. She was standing right over me. Ms. Vance said she saw her bump into me." "I never said that," Patricia shrieked, breaking her silence. She realized the ship was sinking and tried to shove Henderson overboard. "I said she might have bumped him. I didn't see the actual theft." "You said she took it," Marina spoke up. Her voice was steady, cutting through the noise. She was rubbing her bruised wrists, standing next to her father. "You shouted it to the whole cabin. She took it." "That's a statement of fact, Patricia. That's defamation per se." Patricia glared at Marina, hatred burning in her eyes. "You little—" "Careful," Arthur warned, his voice like a whip crack. "We searched her bag," Officer Miller interjected, trying to salvage his own reputation. "The wallet wasn't there, but she could have handed it off, or hid it on the plane." "Hid it on the plane," Arthur repeated. He looked at the jet bridge. "Then let's find it. Everyone on board. Now." It was a surreal procession. Arthur Sterling, Marina, the terrified Mr. Henderson, the trembling Patricia. The 2 police officers and Matthew Blackwood marched back onto the plane. The first-class passengers, who were still seated, watched in shock as the CEO himself walked down the aisle. Arthur stopped at row 1. "Mr. Henderson, sit down," Arthur ordered. Henderson sat in 1C. "Marina, where were you?" "Standing right here." Marina pointed to the aisle. "Patricia was blocking my path to 1A. Arthur looked at the configuration of the seats. Sterling Airways first-class suites were designed for privacy. There was a high partition between the aisle and the seat. To pickpocket someone seated in 1C from the aisle, Marina would have had to lean over a 2-foot barrier unobserved. "It's physically impossible," Arthur stated flatly. "Unless she has arms 4 feet long." "Maybe it fell," Henderson cried. "But it's gone. I checked my pockets." Arthur looked at the seat. He knew the design of the Boeing 737 first-class suites better than the engineers. He had approved the blueprints himself. "The sliding mechanism," Arthur muttered. He knelt on the floor. The first-class seats had a motorized recline feature. There was a small, often overlooked gap between the center console and the seat cushion housing. Arthur reached his hand into the dark crevice of the seat mechanism. He grunted his expensive suit sleeve, brushing the carpet. He pulled his hand out. In his grip was a black leather wallet. The cabin went dead silent. Arthur stood up, dusting off his knees. He held the wallet out to Henderson. "Is this your property?" Arthur asked. Henderson's face turned the color of a tomato. He took the wallet with a trembling hand. He opened it. The cash was there. The credit cards were there. It must have slipped out of my jacket when I sat down." Henderson whispered, his voice barely audible. "It fell into the gap." "So," Arthur said, turning to face the room. "There was no theft. There was no accomplice. There was just a clumsy man and a prejudiced flight attendant who saw a black girl and decided she was a criminal." Arthur turned to Officer Miller. "Release the report. Expunge the arrest, immediately. Or Mr. Blackwood will own the precinct by Monday morning." "Yes, sir." "Absolutely, sir," Miller said, backing away fast. "We're leaving. Sorry for the trouble, Miss Sterling." The cops fled the plane faster than they had arrived. But Arthur wasn't done. He turned his attention to the true villain. Patricia Vance was standing by the galley wall, looking like a trapped animal. She had no police to hide behind. She had no passengers on her side. She was alone with the man who owned her career. I made a mistake," Patricia stammered, tears streaming down her face. They were tears of fear, not remorse. "Mr. Sterling, please. I've been loyal for 15 years. It was a stressful morning." She wasn't wearing the proper attire for first class. "I was just trying to protect the brand." "Protect the brand," Arthur repeated incredulously. "Patricia, you are the liability to the brand." Arthur signaled to one of the bodyguards who had entered with them. The bodyguard handed Arthur a tablet. "You said earlier that Marina was hostile and belligerent," Arthur said, scrolling through the tablet. "You told Captain Reynolds she was a security threat. You told the police she assaulted a passenger." "She was," Patricia lied, desperate. "It's my word against hers." "No," Arthur said coldly. "It's your word against the cloud." Arthur tapped the screen and turned the tablet around so Patricia and the horrified Mr. Henderson could see it. It was a video feed, high definition, wide angle. "When we retrofitted the 707 fleet last year," Arthur explained, his voice echoing in the silent cabin. "We installed security cameras in the galley and the first-class bulkheads. We did it for insurance purposes to protect against liability claims. The feed goes directly to the corporate server." He pressed play. On the screen, the timestamp showed 30 minutes prior. The video showed Marina walking onto the plane quietly. It showed Patricia immediately stepping in her path, aggressive and rude. It showed Marina politely showing her ticket. It showed Patricia snatching the ticket and screaming. It showed Marina sitting calmly drawing in her book. It showed Patricia stomping back, rallying the passengers, and pointing at Marina. It clearly showed Patricia whispering to Mr. Henderson, gesturing at his pocket, planting the idea of the theft. The audio was crisp. Everyone heard Patricia's sneer. "Systems glitch, or maybe you swiped it." Everyone heard the racism in her tone. "This isn't a mistake, Patricia," Arthur said, turning the tablet off. "This is malice. You saw a young girl alone, and you decided to break her, because you didn't like how she looked. You wanted to humiliate her." Arthur took a step closer to her. "Do you know why Marina was flying commercial today?" Arthur asked. Patricia shook her head, unable to speak. "She is an artist," Arthur said, looking at his daughter with pride. "She just won a prestigious residency in London. She wanted to fly on the airline her grandfather built anonymously to see the world as it is. And you showed her exactly what it is. You showed her that no matter how much money she has, people like you will still treat her like trash." Arthur's voice hardened. "Patricia Vance, you are fired, effective immediately, for cause, meaning no severance, no pension, no benefits." Patricia gasped, clutching her chest. "My pension? I have 15 years. You can't take my pension." "Watch me," Arthur said. "Gross misconduct and moral turpitude void your contract. But that's the easy part." Arthur gestured to Matthew Blackwood, the lawyer. "Mr. Blackwood is filing a civil suit against you personally for defamation, emotional distress, and false imprisonment. We will garnish every wage you earn for the rest of your life. You won't just be unemployed, Patricia. You will be destitute." Patricia collapsed to her knees, sobbing loudly now. "Please, I have a mortgage. I have kids." "Marina is a kid." Arthur shouted, his composure finally cracking. "She is 19, and you were ready to send her to Rikers Island because you didn't like her hoodie. Did you think about her future when you called the police? Did you think about her record?" Arthur turned away from the sobbing woman in disgust. He looked at Mr. Henderson. "And you," Arthur said. Henderson flinched. I'm sorry. I was confused." "You were weak," Arthur corrected. "You let a bigot manipulate you because it confirmed your own biases. You're banned from Sterling Airways. For life. Find another way to London. Get off my plane." "But the flight is about to leave," Henderson protested. "Not with you on it," Arthur said. "And if you don't move in 10 seconds, the police officers waiting outside will be happy to arrest you for filing a false report. I'm sure they'd love to arrest someone today to make up for their mistake." Henderson grabbed his bag and scrambled out of the seat, running down the aisle, past the silent, judging eyes of the other passengers. Arthur turned to Sarah, the junior flight attendant, who had been cowering in the galley this whole time. "You," Arthur said gently. Sarah jumped. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." "You tried to stop her," Arthur said. "I saw it on the video. You told her Marina looked harmless. You suggested asking the captain." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. I should have done more. I was scared of her." "Fear is understandable. But you had the right instincts," Arthur said. "You are now the senior purser for this flight. Take Miss Vance's badge." Sarah's eyes widened. She stepped forward, her hands shaking, and reached out to Patricia. "Patricia," Sarah said softly, "I need your badge." Patricia looked up, her makeup running her face a mask of ruin. She slowly unpinned the silver wings from her uniform, the wings she had worn so arrogantly just an hour ago. She handed them to Sarah. "Escort her off the plane, Sarah," Arthur ordered, "and then serve the champagne. My daughter has had a long morning." As Sarah led a weeping Patricia down the aisle, the walk of shame she had intended for Marina, the first-class cabin did something unexpected. The elderly woman in 2A started clapping, then the man in 2B. Soon the entire cabin was applauding. They weren't clapping for the drama, they were clapping for the justice. Patricia Vance walked off the jet bridge and into a world where she was no longer a queen, but a cautionary tale. But the story wasn't over. The internet works faster than airplanes, and the video of the incident was about to go global. The 7-hour journey across the Atlantic was less of a flight and more of a funeral procession for the old order. Inside the first-class cabin of Flight 409, the atmosphere had shifted so violently, it was almost suffocating. The air, previously thick with judgment and exclusion, was now heavy with a terrified, cloying deference. The remaining passengers, the ones who hadn't been kicked off like Mr. Henderson, sat in a state of paralysis. They were terrified to look at seat 1A, yet unable to look away. They had cheered for an arrest. Now they were witnessing a coronation. Sarah, the newly promoted purser, moved through the cabin with the focus of a battlefield surgeon. She wasn't just doing her job. She was performing an act of penance on behalf of the entire crew. The standard pre-flight nuts were replaced with warm macadamia and truffle mix. The champagne wasn't the standard business class pause. Sarah had unlocked the owner's reserve locker, popping a bottle of Dom Perignon, usually saved for royalty. But Marina Sterling didn't touch the champagne. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, her battered combat boots resting on the $12,000 leather ottoman. She was sketching. Her charcoal pencil scratched aggressively against the paper, capturing the sharp angles of the cabin, the fake smiles of the passengers, and the ghost of Patricia Vance's sneer. Arthur Sterling sat in 1B, his large frame filling the suite. He had turned his phone off. For the first time in a decade, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises wasn't working. He was just a father, watching his daughter process a trauma he had built the stage for. "I warned you the world was cold, Marina," Arthur said softly, his voice barely rising above the hum of the engines. "But I never thought the frost would come from my own staff." Marina didn't look up from her sketchbook. It wasn't just her dad. It was the whole cabin. "Did you see them, the old lady in 2A? The guy in the suit? They were ready to watch me get dragged away. They wanted it. It made them feel safe." "They were weak," Arthur rumbled, his eyes hardening, as he glanced around the cabin, daring anyone to meet his gaze. No one did. The elderly woman in 2A was aggressively pretending to sleep. "Fear makes people stupid, Marina, and prejudice makes them cruel. Patricia gave them permission to be their worst selves. That's why she had to go." "She didn't just go, Dad," Marina said, finally looking at him. Her eyes were dry, but they held a wisdom far beyond her 19 years. "You incinerated her." "I did what was necessary," Arthur replied, taking a sip of sparkling water. "There are some stains you don't wash out. You cut them out." While the mood at 35,000 feet was somber and reflective, the world below was detonating. The internet, a beast that never sleeps, had found its meal for the day. David, the tech entrepreneur in seat 3B, had not been idle. He had recorded everything. He had captured the sneer, the arrival of the police, the planting of the theft narrative, and the earth-shattering arrival of Arthur Sterling. He had uploaded the 4-minute clip to TikTok and Twitter, just as the plane reached cruising altitude using the ship's Wi-Fi. He captioned it simply, "Flight attendant profiles. Black girl in first class. Doesn't realize her dad owns the airline. Watch until the end. Sterling Airways Naport Karma hasht for AFO." By the time Flight 409 was crossing the coast of Nova Scotia, the video had 1 million views. By the time they were over the mid-Atlantic, it had hit 15 million. It was the perfect viral storm. It had a clear villain, a sympathetic victim, and a climax that felt like a Hollywood movie. The comments section was a scrolling blur of rage and vindication. At Justice for Marina. The way she touched her hair, I would have thrown hands. This is sickening. At Flyboy 99. I've flown with Patricia Vance. She was rude to my wife last year. Karma is coming for her. @LawyerUp. That is false imprisonment, defamation, and emotional distress. That flight attendant is about to be homeless. The internet sleuths, the terrifyingly efficient hive mind of social media, went to work. Within an hour, Patricia's entire digital footprint was unearthed. Her high school yearbook photo, her LinkedIn profile praising her attention to detail, and even her local homeowners association complaints were plastered across Reddit threads. Back at JFK International Airport, Patricia Vance was living a nightmare that kept getting worse. After being escorted off the plane, she was brought to the crew operations center. It wasn't a quiet exit. The terminal was filled with televisions, and every single one of them was tuned to CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, and every single screen was showing her face. She walked the walk of shame through the terminal she used to rule. But this time she had no badge. She had no uniform jacket. Sarah had confiscated it. She was just a middle-aged woman in a rumpled white blouse, walking past passengers who were pointing their phones at her. "That's her," someone shouted near the food court. "That's the racist lady from the video. Hey, Patricia," a teenager yelled, filming her for his live stream. "How's the unemployment line look?" Patricia kept her head down, tears streaming down her face, her mascara leaving black tracks on her cheeks. She reached the operations desk, expecting some sympathy from her colleagues. She found none. The base manager, a woman Patricia had known for 10 years, didn't even look up from her computer. She slid a single piece of paper across the counter. "Sign here, Patricia," the manager said coldly. "Surrender your airport ID and your parking pass." "Carol, please," Patricia begged, her voice cracking. "You know me. It was a mistake. I was stressed." Carol finally looked up. Her expression was one of pure disgust. "I watched the video, Patricia. That wasn't stress. That was hate. You're lucky Mr. Sterling didn't have you arrested for filing a false police report. Just sign the damn paper." Patricia signed with a shaking hand. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. It had been buzzing non-stop, but this was an email notification that made her blood run cold. It was from her landlord. Subject: Notice to vacate. Ms. Vance, it has come to our attention that your employment with Sterling Airways has been terminated for cause. As your apartment is a corporate subsidized unit tied to your seniority status, your lease is hereby void. You have 72 hours to remove your belongings. She stumbled out of the office and onto the curb, waiting for an Uber, because her company car privileges had been revoked instantly. As she stood in the exhaust fumes of the pickup lane, another notification pinged. It was her bank app. "Alert, your accounts have been temporarily frozen, pending a legal inquiry regarding Sterling Enterprises vs. Vance." She dropped her phone. The screen cracked on the concrete. She sank to the curb, burying her face in her hands. She had spent 15 years building a life of comfort and petty power, and it had taken exactly 45 minutes to turn it all into ash. Meanwhile in London, the sun was breaking through the clouds as Flight 409 began its descent. The landing was smooth, but the taxi was unusual. The captain announced they would be parking at a remote stand, usually reserved for diplomatic flights. "Why aren't we going to the gate?" a nervous passenger asked. Arthur stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Because my daughter is not walking through a terminal today." When the cabin door opened, the cool London air rushed in. A portable staircase was attached. At the bottom, a scene unfolded that looked like a movie premiere. A fleet of 3 black Range Rovers sat on the tarmac, engines idling. A team of security guards formed a perimeter. Beyond them, behind a barrier, was a pack of paparazzi. The British press had smelled blood in the water. Marina stood at the top of the stairs. She looked down at the spectacle. "Ready?" Arthur asked, offering his arm. "No," Marina said. She didn't take his arm. She adjusted her backpack, pulled her hoodie up slightly, and took a deep breath. "But let's do it anyway." They descended the stairs. The cameras went wild. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding, stroboscopic rhythm. Reporters shouted questions over the roar of the jet engines. Marina, over here." "Mr. Sterling, are you suing the police?" "Marina, what do you have to say to the internet?" Marina walked with her head high. She didn't look like a victim, in her paint-splattered clothes and combat boots, contrasting against the sterile luxury of the private jet terminal. She looked like a punk rock queen. Matthew Blackwood, the company lawyer, met them on the tarmac. He looked delighted. "The statement is released," Blackwood said, walking fast alongside them. "We've framed it as a zero-tolerance victory. The stock is up, and Patricia Vance is currently trending higher than the royal family." Arthur nodded. "Make sure she stays there. I want her to be the example taught in every HR training video for the next 50 years. As they reached the lead car, a reporter from the Daily Mail managed to break through the noise. "Marina, one question," the reporter screamed. "Patricia Vance says she was just doing her job. What is your message to her now that she's lost everything?" Marina paused. Her hand was on the door handle of the SUV. She looked back at the plane, then at the camera lens pointed at her face. She thought about the handcuffs. She thought about the fear in the pit of her stomach when the officer grabbed her. She thought about the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of a woman who thought a uniform gave her the right to judge a human soul. Marina looked directly into the camera lens, her expression deadpan. "My message," Marina said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Tell her the seat recline in 1A works perfectly. She should have checked the manual." She slid into the back of the Range Rover. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing out the noise of the world. As the convoy sped away toward the city, leaving the airport behind, Marina finally let out a breath she felt like she had been holding since New York. She pulled out her sketchbook and turned to a fresh, clean page. The drawing of Patricia was finished. It was time to draw something new. What happened on Flight 409 wasn't just about a plane ticket. It was about the dangerous assumptions people make based on appearance and the devastating consequences when power is abused. Patricia Vance thought she was protecting her tiny kingdom, but she ended up losing everything because she couldn't see past her own prejudice. Marina Sterling didn't need her father's wealth to have dignity, but his arrival ensured that justice wasn't just served, it was broadcast to the world. The karma that hit Patricia was swift, digital, and absolutely complete. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, and if you believe that everyone deserves respect regardless of what they're wearing, smash that like button and share this video. Subscribe to the channel for more stories where the underdog bites back and karma always delivers. Thanks for watching.